Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into a world where, well, your emotional reactions might just be under warranty, and maybe your biggest enemy is simply a bad judgment call. We are talking about Stoicism.
Yeah, the sort of ancient operating system for modern life, as people sometimes call it.
Exactly. But, if you trace Stoicism back to its origins, back in ancient Athens, it really wasn't some kind of inevitable winner, was it?
Oh, absolutely not. We tend to focus on the big names, Plato, Aristotle. But the intellectual marketplace back then, it was just overflowing. Greece was buzzing with competing schools.
Right. We picture this classical era, maybe Plato's Academy, Aristotle's Lyceum, but it sounds more like, I don't know, an ancient intellectual mall. Sources show dozens of philosophical movements, all vying for attention, right when Stoicism was starting.
It was fierce. Total chaos, in a good way maybe. Stoicism, which Zeno of Citium founded, it had to carve out its niche against so many others. You had the Cyrenaics, focused on pleasure, the skeptics, doubting everything, obviously, then the Megarian school, the Elean, the Erythraean, and even really specialized ones like the Anaxagorean, Theodorian, eudaimonists. I mean, the list goes on. Stoicism was just one little option in this huge philosophical forest.
So our mission today is to dig into those demanding foundations of Stoicism, this ancient art of living well, and then really track its surprising comeback and its modern uses.
Yeah, where is it heading next? That's the question. And how did these ancient ideas actually give us tools, like a blueprint, for dealing with all the complexity and, frankly, the uncertainty of the 21st century?
Okay, so to get there, we need to understand what Stoicism was at its core. How would you define it initially?
Well, at its heart, Stoicism is best seen as a complete coherent system. It really prided itself on having this rational explanation for how the universe works
Okay.
and for the individual. The ultimate goal was achieving complete harmony, total alignment between your own actions and the way events unfold naturally.
Living in accordance with nature, or logos, that phrase comes up a lot.
Exactly. Logos, that's the key. It's this divine, rational, and actually material force that's embedded in the cosmos. It structures everything.
So logos isn't just some vague idea of reason. It's more like the operating code of the universe.
That's a great way to put it. And for the Stoics, this logos wasn't abstract or spiritual in the way we might think. It was material. They described it as a kind of fiery breath pneuma that permeates everything.
Wow, okay.
And this ensured the universe was teleological, designed with a purpose, and totally rationally ordered. So if you understand this framework, you understand that everything that happens is part of this necessary divine chain of cause and effect.
Which means accepting things.
Well, accepting the rational order.
Yeah.
If the universe is governed by this divine reason, this logos, and we humans have a spark of that same reason within us, then the ultimate good for us is simply to align our will, our choices, with that cosmic flow.
Makes sense. So it all connects.
It all has to connect. That's the coherence part.
Okay, let's step back into Zeno's school, around 300 BC. If you, the listener, actually enrolled there at the Stoa Poikile, the painted porch, what would that curriculum look like? It wasn't just sitting under a tree thinking deep thoughts, right?
Definitely not. The classical Stoa curriculum, especially in the early days, the early Stoa, was really rigorously defined. It had three main parts: logic, physics cosmology, and ethics.
The three pillars.
Right. And crucially, they believed these parts were totally inseparable. Like, the shell, the white, and the yolk of an egg. You need all three for it to be a complete egg.
Let's unpack logic first. When I hear logic, I think, I don't know, syllogisms, maybe abstract math proofs. How did the Stoics make it practical, useful for life?
Yeah, their approach to logic was intensely practical. Sure, it involved abstract thought, but it's much broader than just formal deduction. It was really about training the rational faculty itself.
How so?
Well, the discipline included formal debate, yes, but also rhetoric, grammar, and really importantly, the careful analysis of mental impressions, how we perceive things and form judgments. You have to remember, parents were sending their kids to these schools to succeed in public life.
So they needed to be persuasive.
Exactly. They needed those skills. So logic was partly about sharpening those practical abilities, detecting fallacies in arguments others made, understanding linguistic tricks, winning debates.
Defending yourself in the marketplace of ideas, literally.
Absolutely. And maybe even more critically for the philosophy's survival, they developed the foundations of what we now call propositional logic, the logic of if P, then Q statements.
Why was that so important?
Because they needed it to defend their whole system against really detailed attacks, especially from the academic skeptics who came after Plato. Logic was like the shield protecting the entire Stoic worldview.
That makes sense. A strong defense requires strong logic. But then you have the second pillar, physics or cosmology. That seems, well, a bit counterintuitive for a philosophy focused on living a good life. Why worry about the gods and the universe's creation?
Well, Stoic physics was basically their combined theology and metaphysics. Remember, this is before modern science. People, students, they appreciated having a complete, coherent story about how the world worked.
So it provided answers.
It did. It dealt with the existence and nature of the gods, why the universe was created, that teleology idea again, and the role the gods played in determining events. Fate, basically.
Okay.
If you understood this divine, rational structure of the cosmos of the logos, then your ethical duty, aligning your will with it, suddenly became rationally necessary. It wasn't just a suggestion, it was the logical conclusion. The physics justified the ethics.
Which brings us neatly to that third pillar, ethics. This is the part most people think of when they hear Stoicism today, right? The focus on virtue and resilience.
Exactly. Ethics was the ultimate goal, the payoff. But the focus wasn't quite on moral right and wrong in the modern sense, which often centers on specific acts. It was more about the big practical question. How do you actually live a good life? A flourishing life?
Eudaimonia.
Precisely. And they argued eudaimonia was achieved through the sole good, virtue. So ethics was essentially the instruction manual for achieving that inner harmony through rational thought and action.
Now, Zeno, the founder, he seems to have wanted this manual to be pretty short and sweet. Very practical, concise, maybe reflecting his roots in cynicism.
Oh, definitely. Zeno was all about improving character, not getting bogged down in endless academic debates. His teaching style was often, well, brief. Terse, even.
Like bullet points.
Almost. There's that great story where a student complains his arguments are too abrupt, and Zeno supposedly says, yeah, I'd abbreviate the syllables too if I could manage it. He wanted philosophy you could use immediately.
But that simplicity couldn't last, could it? With all those competing schools and critics, Stoicism had to evolve. It had to get more systematic, moving beyond Zeno's style.
Right. And that leads us to Chrysippus, Zeno's successor. He was the great system builder, absolutely necessary for Stoicism's long-term survival, I think.
He wrote a lot, didn't he? Something like 700 books.
An incredible amount, yeah.
Yeah.
Sadly, almost none of it survives directly, but his massive output was basically a direct response to all that external criticism.
Oh.
Stoicism was under constant attack, especially from those academic skeptics who were brilliant at finding logical holes.
So Chrysippus had to kind of bulletproof the system, turn Zeno's practical advice into an unassailable fortress of logic.
That's a good way to think about it.
Yeah.
He had to develop much more sophisticated, systematic arguments, particularly in logic, just to fend off the critics. He made huge advances in propositional logic, linguistic analysis stuff that's foundational to modern logic, all to defend the core Stoic ideas about the rational cosmos.
Without him, it might have just faded away.
Very possibly. Like the Megarians or others. Chrysippus gave it the intellectual backbone it needed to endure for centuries.
And what's really striking is that this process shows Stoicism wasn't some rigid dogma, even from early on. It could adapt.
Hugely important. It was dynamic. Chrysippus actually disagreed with Zeno and with his own teacher Cleanthes on quite a few points.
Oh.
This internal debate wasn't seen as a weakness. It was part of its strength.
He just wanted the best arguments.
Yeah, there's a story, maybe apocryphal, that he used to ask Cleanthes just to tell him the basic doctrines, the conclusions, so he could focus his own energy on finding better arguments to support them. That culture of critical revision kept it alive and relevant.
Okay, this evolution brings us to the Roman era. This is where Stoicism really hits the mainstream consciousness for us today, largely because the writings of Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius actually survived.
And they're such fascinating figures representing this incredible range of Roman life. It shows how adaptable the philosophy was. You have Seneca first.
The wealthy politician, playwright, and maybe most famously, the tutor to Emperor Nero. Talk about a high-stress job.
Right. Seneca's life seems full of contradictions. Immense wealth and luxury while preaching philosophical simplicity. How did he square that circle?
Yeah, that's the big question. How did he or the sources justify that? Or was it just, convenient?
Well, he definitely spent a lot of time writing about it, defending his position. His basic argument was that wealth itself is indifferent. Its value depends entirely on the character of the person who has it.
An indifferent but a preferred one.
Exactly.
Okay.
A preferred indifferent. Good to have, useful even, but not essential for virtue. A wise person, he argued, can use wealth virtuously for generosity's sake, whereas a fool might use poverty as an excuse for vice. But wrestling with this, living under Nero, it clearly forced him to reconcile the philosophical ideals with, as he put it, the facts and frailty of human nature.
And his own life had plenty of frailty. Exile, political danger, Nero's unpredictable cruelty.
Absolutely. And you see that reflected in his writings. He sort of softened the earlier, perhaps more rigid Greek ideal of apatheia, the complete absence of disruptive emotions.
Oh, so.
He allowed for what the Stoics called eupatheiai, or good feelings, things like rational joy, caution, appropriate wishing. And crucially, he made space for limited rational grief, especially for friends. He stressed the duty to live for the other person, acknowledging that deep connections mean loss hurts. And that's understandable. It needs to be managed rationally, not just denied.
Fascinating. Then you have Epictetus, who had the complete opposite background, born into slavery.
Right. He eventually gained freedom and became an influential teacher. His experience as a slave profoundly shaped his philosophy. He focused laser-like on that core Stoic distinction. What's in our control versus what isn't.
The dichotomy of control.
Exactly. Having lived with his body and freedom being completely subject to another's will, he relentlessly emphasized the absolute invincible power of our own rational choice, our proheiresis. He called the mind our faculty of judgment and assent, a portion of God.
So external circumstances can't touch your inner self.
That was his message. A tyrant can chain your leg, he'd say, but they cannot force your judgment or break your will unless you let them. Your inner citadel is inviolable.
And finally, the most famous, perhaps, Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, emperor of Rome.
Marcus is unique because his Stoicism wasn't for teaching or public display. It was intensely personal. His meditations, the original title is Tai Eis Hüten, meaning to himself, were essentially a private journal.
Wow, really? Not meant for publication.
Seems not. He wrote them for self-reflection, self-correction, often while he was out on brutal military campaigns on the frontier. It's his incredibly intimate look at a man in immense power, constantly reminding himself of his philosophical duties, rehearsing virtue, trying to stay grounded.
It shows philosophy as a daily practice, even for an emperor.
Especially for an emperor, maybe. A private shield against the temptations of power and the despair of war and plague.
Okay, so these Roman figures kept the flame alive. But let's jump forward. The modern resurgence of Stoicism, it isn't just people rediscovering these old books, is it? There's a direct line to modern psychology.
Oh, absolutely direct. This is where it gets really practical and, frankly, clinically validated. Stoicism is the acknowledged philosophical ancestor of some major evidence-based psychotherapies.
Like cognitive behavioral therapies, CBT?
Precisely. CBT is arguably the gold standard in psychotherapy today for many conditions. Its founder, Aaron T. Beck, was very clear about it. He explicitly stated that the core cognitive model, the idea that our thoughts and beliefs shape our emotional responses, traces its philosophical origins straight back to the Stoics.
And it's even stronger with rational emotive behavior therapy, REBT.
Even more explicit, Albert Ellis, who developed REBT, was incredibly forthright. He credited Stoicism as a primary influence. He even said that no single individual, not even Freud, had a greater impact on modern psychotherapy than the Stoic philosophers did.
That's a huge claim. What's the foundational insight here, the key Stoic idea that fuels these therapies?
It boils down to one revolutionary concept. We don't react directly to events themselves. We react to our judgments about those events.
The space between stimulus and response.
Exactly. The Stoic had this detailed theory of perception. An event happens, it creates an impression or presentation in our mind. Then, our rational faculty either gives assent, agrees with the judgment attached to that impression, or it withholds assent.
Marcus Aurelius put it very directly, didn't he?
He did. If any external thing causes you distress, it is not the thing itself that troubles you, but your own judgment about it. And this you have the power to eliminate now. That's pure cognitive therapy, centuries early.
That puts the power right back in your hands. But it requires really careful sorting, doesn't it? Which brings us back to Epictetus and his dichotomy of control.
Yes, Epictetus insisted on this strict categorization. You have to constantly ask, is this up to me or not up to me?
What falls into each category?
Up to us are our judgments, our opinions, our impulses, our desires, and aversions, basically, the inner workings of our own mind. Not up to us. Pretty much everything else, our body, health, possessions, reputation, other people's actions, political outcomes, the weather.
And getting that classification wrong is where the trouble starts.
Guaranteed suffering. If you misclassify, say, you treat getting that promotion or someone liking you, as something essential for your happiness, something good in itself, rather than an indifferent thing. You're setting yourself up for disappointment. Why? Because those things are not fully in your control.
You're handing over your peace of mind.
Exactly. Epictetus warned you're essentially giving the remote control for your happiness to the whims of something or someone else. Misclassification is the fundamental error that leads to frustration, anger, anxiety.
What about really strong emotions like intense anger or jealousy? They often feel completely involuntary. Seneca had thoughts on this, didn't he?
He did. He described emotions like rage as a kind of temporary madness. He believed they compromised the entire rational mind and were best avoided altogether, or at least managed very proactively. He made a really useful distinction.
Which was?
He differentiated between the initial automatic physiological reaction, he called it the first movement, and the full-blown emotion. That first movement, like maybe blushing when insulted or trembling with shock, that's involuntary, like a reflex, like sneezing. You're not really responsible for that.
Okay, so the initial jolt isn't the problem. When does it become, say, culpable anger?
It becomes a full passion, pathos, when the mind gives assent to the judgment that typically accompanies that jolt. For example, the judgment, "This insult is outrageous. I've been deeply wronged and must retaliate."
Ah, so you have a moment to catch it.
Yes. If you consciously withhold assent from that judgment, if you refuse to agree with it, the physiological reaction will eventually subside without escalating into destructive rage. Seneca advised acting calmly from duty or justice instead, arresting the judgment before it takes root.
This theoretical framework, this mental toolkit, it really proved its worth in the most brutal circumstances imaginable, didn't it? Thinking about Viktor Frankl and the Holocaust.
Frankl's story is incredibly powerful. He was a neurologist and psychiatrist who survived Auschwitz and other camps. His experiences there directly led him to develop logotherapy, therapy focused on finding meaning in life.
And what did he observe?
He observed that even in those absolute depths of suffering, certain things were crucial for survival. Things like using imagination, finding humor, holding on to a sense of duty or future purpose, but above all, the power of the chosen attitude.
Choosing how to respond internally even when you couldn't control anything externally.
Exactly. He saw that the prisoners who often had a better chance were those who felt they had a task waiting for them, finishing a book, reuniting with a loved one. Meaning could be found in creating something, in loving someone, or, crucially, in the attitude one chose towards unavoidable suffering.
That sounds profoundly stoic. The ultimate freedom is internal.
It really is. Frankl confirmed that the last human freedom is the ability to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. Logotherapy, much like Stoicism, reframes even death the past, becomes this secure storehouse of meaning and achievement that can't be taken away.
And then there's the case of Vice Admiral James Stockdale, the U.S. Navy pilot shot down over Vietnam.
Another incredible real-world testament, Stockdale was the highest-ranking American POW in the infamous Hanoi Hilton. He was held for over 7 years, endured horrific torture, solitary confinement.
And he explicitly credited Stoicism.
He did, very explicitly. He said his study of Epictetus before being deployed was absolutely essential for his survival and his ability to lead resistance among the other prisoners.
How did he apply Epictetus's dichotomy of control in that hellish environment?
He realized with brutal clarity what he couldn't control. The guards, the torture methods, the length of his captivity, whether he'd ever get out, that was all external, not up to him.
So what was up to him?
His own choices, his internal resolve, his responses to pain, the integrity of his own thoughts and actions. He focused on maintaining his own conduct, communicating and organizing resistance when possible, and using mental exercises, reciting philosophy, maintaining internal discipline. By focusing only on his own volition, he found a kind of invincible determination that his captors couldn't break.
It's stunning how practical it became under fire. Okay, so we see the power for individual resilience. But modern Stoicism sometimes gets criticized for being too navel-gazing, too focused on the self. The original Stoics, though, they were very concerned with society, weren't they?
Oh, deeply. They were often politically active, and their philosophy has profound implications for collective challenges, the kind we face today, like climate change, political division, global inequality.
And the key concept there is cosmopolitanism, world citizenship.
Exactly. It's an idea that actually has roots in the earlier Cynic philosophers, but the Stoics really developed it. They argued that each of us is simultaneously a citizen of two communities, two commonwealths.
What are those two?
Well, first there's the local one, your city, your nation, the specific community you belong to, often just by accident and birth. You definitely have duties and responsibilities there.
Okay, that's straightforward. What's the second one?
The second is the vast and truly common state, as Seneca called it, which embraces alike gods and men. This is the commonwealth of all rational beings across the globe. Your citizenship here isn't measured by local borders, but, as they beautifully put it, by the path of the sun. It's universal.
The implications are huge then. It means our ultimate allegiance, our deepest duty of care, goes beyond our own tribe, our own nation.
Absolutely. It implies a hierarchy of obligations. There's a famous model from the Stoic hierarchies using concentric circles. You start with yourself, then your family, then your local community, your country. But the outermost circle encompasses all of humanity, the entire cosmos.
And the goal is to pull those outer circles inward.
Yes, to constantly work, to extend your sense of care and responsibility outwards. This idea of being a cosmopolite, a citizen of the world, is such a powerful antidote to things like extreme nationalism or political polarization, which thrive on seeing the other group as fundamentally different and less worthy of concern.
So applying that to something like, say, climate change, the cosmopolitan view would demand that our responsibility to the global community, including future generations, has to override short-term national economic interests that cause harm.
That's the logical conclusion, yes. Our shared rationality connects us to all of humankind. It pushes us beyond narrow self-interest towards a global rational duty. It forces us to ask if our actions align with the logos, with the well-being of the whole human family.
That's a challenging perspective. Another challenging Stoic idea for modern society is their view on adversity. We tend to seek comfort, ease, security, but the Stoics, especially Seneca, seem to think that was a mistake.
Seneca was almost scathing about the pursuit of constant comfort. He argued that too much unbroken good fortune is actually real misfortune. Why? Because it makes us soft, complacent, ungrateful, lazy, always wanting more ease. He literally said there's no worse luck than perpetual luxury because it robs you of the chance to test and strengthen your character.
Wow. So adversity isn't a bug, it's a feature. It's the gym for the soul.
That's a perfect analogy. Adversity is the testing ground. It's seen as an opportunity, maybe even a sign that you have a virtuous character capable of handling it. It lets you practice and develop specific virtues: patience, courage, resilience, fortitude.
Seneca had an analogy for this too, right? About a general.
Yes, a powerful one. He said a good general doesn't send his rookies or his weakest soldiers into the toughest part of the battle. He sends his best, his most trusted veterans. Similarly, the gods, or nature, send the hardest challenges to those individuals deemed worthy and capable enough to face them virtuously. It reframes hardship as a kind of honor, a chance to prove your mettle.
This connects to their concept of fate, or cosmic determinism, the idea that everything happens necessarily. For people facing huge, overwhelming problems today, global pandemics, entrenched poverty, seemingly endless conflicts, doesn't believing in fate just lead to apathy? Like, why bother trying if the outcome is already written?
That's the classic misunderstanding and a common criticism, but it misses the Stoic view of agency. Yes, they believed in fate in the sense that, given the complete web of prior causes, any event that occurs had to occur exactly as it did. It's therefore fruitless, as they said, to wish that things had turned out otherwise. That part is about rational acceptance of reality after the fact.
But it's not passive resignation before the fact.
No. Crucially, it doesn't remove your agency in the present moment. Your agency lies entirely in your internal response, your judgments, your intentions, your actions now.
So how did Epictetus explain this?
He said that the whole point of education is precisely learning to will all individual things just as they happen. Meaning, learning to keep your inner state, your judgments, in harmony with the flow of events. You accept you can't change external conditions that wasn't granted to you, but you have absolute freedom over your internal response, your choices, your character.
So the Stoic acts virtuously regardless of the outcome.
Exactly. You do the right thing because it's the right thing, because virtue is the only true good. Whether your action achieves the external result you hoped for is ultimately up to fate. It's an indifferent. Failing to get the outcome is fate's domain. Failing to act virtuously is your moral error. That's the distinction.
Marcus Aurelius used a specific mental technique to help with this acceptance, didn't he? The view from above, or cosmic perspective.
Yes, it's a powerful cognitive distancing technique. He encouraged repeatedly using your imagination to zoom out. Picture yourself looking down on the Earth from a great height like an astronaut, or even contemplating the vastness of the galaxies.
What does that achieve?
It puts things in perspective. From that vantage point, our individual lives, our cities, our everyday worries and conflicts seem incredibly small and temporary. It helps detach from transient anxieties, the traffic jam, the annoying colleague, the political argument, and reconnect with the larger impersonal order of nature. It makes your personal problems seem appropriately scaled, less overwhelming.
Okay, so if this philosophy is going to keep helping us navigate the future, it needs to be practical. What were some of the specific exercises, the disciplines people actually did day to day?
Well, Epictetus laid out three core areas of training needed to become a truly excellent person: a prokopton, or one making progress. These translate directly into practices we can still use.
What's the first one?
The first field is the discipline of desire and aversion. The goal here is to train yourself to only desire what is truly up to you, like acting virtuously, and to only feel aversion towards things that are contrary to your own rational nature, like vice. And crucially, to accept unavoidable externals without aversion. This brings tranquility.
Managing your expectations internally. What's the second field?
The second is the discipline of action, or impulse and duty. This focuses on how you actually behave in the world. How do you act virtuously towards others? How do you fulfill your natural roles as a parent, a friend, a citizen, in accordance with reason and justice? This is the sphere of ethical conduct.
And the third?
The third is the discipline of assent. This is about maintaining clear, accurate judgment, training your mind to avoid being deceived by false impressions or flawed reasoning, whether from external sources or your own biases. It's about intellectual vigilance, protecting the ruling faculty.
These sound like serious mental workouts. Seneca offered a particularly bracing one for dealing with loss and uncertainty, anticipating misfortune.
That's the famous premeditatio malorum, literally the premeditation of evils or misfortunes. Seneca strongly advised actively contemplating potential future hardships, illness, poverty, exile, the death of loved ones, your own death.
Sounds pretty grim. Why do that?
The goal isn't to be morbid or to wallow in negativity. It's the opposite. It's to reduce the psychological shock and emotional turmoil when bad things inevitably do happen. By mentally rehearsing adversity, you rob it of its power of surprise.
So you're less likely to feel victimized, like something unexpected and unfair has happened uniquely to you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You remind yourself that all the good things in life, health, wealth, relationships, are fragile and ultimately temporary, on loan from fortune. By acknowledging the possibility of their loss beforehand, you greet actual misfortune with greater equanimity, seeing it as part of the natural, albeit difficult, course of events.
And modern Stoic practice has adapted these ideas into things like specific journaling techniques.
Yes, absolutely. One very effective technique, drawing on cognitive distancing, is the second-person writing exercise.
How does that work?
Instead of writing about your problems or anxieties in the first person, like, I feel so overwhelmed by this project, I don't know where to start, which tends to keep you stuck in the feeling. You switch to the second person, addressing yourself as you, or even by your own name.
So it would be like, okay, your name, you're feeling overwhelmed by this project right now. That feeling is based on a judgment. What specific, controllable step can you take first?
Precisely. Or just giving yourself advice, you need to break this down. That simple shift creates psychological distance.
Yeah.
It allows you to step back, access your rational problem-solving mind, rather than just stewing in the emotion. It turns journaling from mere venting into active self-coaching.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, underpinning all these practices is the core Stoic value system, virtue as the highest good, and everything else being indifferent. How does that hierarchy help us make choices today?
It's fundamental. Virtue, wisdom, justice, courage, temperance is the only thing the Stoics consider truly good in itself. Why? Because it's always beneficial, it can't be used badly, and crucially, it can't be taken away by external events. It resides entirely within your character.
And everything else, health, money, reputation.
Those are all indifferents. They have no inherent moral value, good or bad. They don't contribute to or detract from your fundamental happiness, which comes only from virtue.
But surely they preferred being healthy to sick or wealthy to poor. They weren't saying those things don't matter at all.
No, not at all. They made a distinction. Within the category of indifference, some are preferred, like health, wealth, friends, because they generally align with our natural constitution and provide opportunities to exercise virtue. Others are dispreferred, like sickness, poverty. It's rational to prefer the preferred ones, but the crucial but is that you never trade virtue to obtain or keep a preferred indifferent. This is where the idea of lexicographic preferences comes in, often borrowed from economics to explain it.
Lexicographic, like a dictionary.
Yeah, think of it like alphabetizing. A always comes before B, no matter how many B's you have. In this analogy, virtue is A, and all the indifferents are B, C, D, etc. You'd never sacrifice A, virtue, for any amount of B, say wealth, or C, health.
So you wouldn't lie or cheat, sacrifice virtue, to get a promotion, gain a preferred indifferent.
Never. The moment acquiring or keeping a preferred indifferent requires you to act unjustly, cowardly, or intemperately, you must instantly reject it. Because the cost, the loss of virtue, the only true good, is considered infinite. That trade-off is never rational.
This really emphasizes that the future of Stoicism, if it's to remain authentic, has to keep that moral core central. It can't just become a life hack for success.
That's the danger, perhaps. If modern Stoicism gets reduced to just techniques for feeling less stressed at work or being more productive, without engaging with justice, duty, and the supremacy of virtue, then it's lost its soul. The goal has to remain ethical flourishing, using preferred indifference wisely when possible, but never prioritizing them over character.
Okay, one final, very practical piece of advice from the Stoics, focusing on our most limited resource time. In our modern world, often obsessed with extending lifespan, what was Seneca's take?
Seneca's essay on the shortness of life is just brilliant and so relevant. His core point isn't about making life quantitatively longer, it's about making it qualitatively fuller. It's about making full use of each day as it comes, treating every day as potentially your last, not morbidly, but with focus.
Why did he think life feels short for most people?
Because, he argued, most people don't really live much of it. They waste vast amounts of time. They're consumed by trivialities, distracted by anxieties, living in the past, weariness of the present, or constantly deferring life to the future, longing for the future.
Always preparing to live, but never actually getting started.
Exactly. He'd say the truly short life isn't the one that ends early, but the one that's spent busy doing nothing of consequence, procrastinating on what truly matters, like developing one's character and wisdom.
So the Stoic practice is about intense presence and purpose now.
Yes. Treat your time as the precious, finite commodity it is. Stop letting trivial things or other people's demands steal it unnecessarily. Stop putting off your own philosophical development. Focus on living virtuously, making the most of this day, this moment. That's how you make life feel long and meaningful, regardless of its chronological length.
It's a powerful call to action. So let's try to wrap this up. We've journeyed from Stoicism's roots in Athens, with its tough curriculum of logic, physics, and ethics,
Through the vital systematization by Chrysippus that allowed it to survive.
to its Roman expressions in Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius, and then its incredible modern impact as the philosophical foundation for therapies like CBT and REBT.
Yeah, offering tools for individual resilience, managing judgment, understanding control.
And also providing a framework for tackling collective problems through ideas like cosmopolitanism, reframing adversity, and rationally accepting what we can't change.
But as we think about where Stoicism goes next, there's maybe one final, slightly deeper point to consider, related to that idea of apatheia, the freedom from disturbing passions.
Okay. The idea of the calm, unflappable Stoic.
Well, yes, that's part of it. But some interpretations suggest we might miss something if we only focus on tranquility. If emotions or passions in a rational person follow from their judgments about value,
Right, feelings are based on beliefs.
then the Stoic sage, the ideal wise person, who most clearly understands the supreme value of virtue, well, shouldn't they be the person most passionately affected by it?
Wait, so not emotionless, but intensely passionate about the right things.
Perhaps. Instead of just being calmly detached, maybe the sage should feel intense joy in acting justly, profound commitment to courage, deep love for wisdom itself, concisely because they perceive these things as surpassingly valuable. The goal might not be emotional flatness, but rather channeling intense passion towards what truly deserves it, virtue itself.
That completely flips the common stereotype of the cold, unfeeling Stoic. It's a challenge to think about.
It is a final provocation, maybe.
So we'll leave you, the listener, with this thought to carry away. If knowledge and virtue truly are the ultimate secure goods, the things that can't be taken from you, what is one external thing you currently chase? Maybe it's status, a specific achievement, more money, approval that you would genuinely be willing to trade right now for even a small increase in your own wisdom or character. And what does your honest answer reveal about where your real priorities lie?
Something important to consider as you step out of our discussion and back into the complexities of your own life.
We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.